Hello there, and as usual, I'm Aaron from UncleSte and Gamers, and welcome. So today we're touching on quite an interesting subject. Now there's been a lot of confusion and a lot of conspiracy around armor and how you can manipulate your armor on your small ship to make it more effective. But let's actually find out today what the truth is behind this. So I've laid out numbers of different sort of compositions of armor that people have been talking about on the workshop. So we've got thickness layers, so we've just got pure blocks on blocks. We've got composite armor, that's a combination of different sort of armor types. And we've also got spaced armor over here. We've also got some basic sloped and angled armor with thin layers so we can just work out. And finally we've got an experimental armor that I'm working with at the moment. Now some of these are a little bit bulky at the moment, but they can be confined down by using smaller objects and just using a smaller surface area. So the main question that many of you asked is, will sloping my armor make an effect? And I've covered this before, but we're going to look at it once again, but we're going to need to set some sort of dry characteristics. So we're going to add the weapons to our list, and we've got a Gatling gun and a rocket launcher on here, and we're going to actually just have a quick look how they are. To keep this all fair, we're going to come onto the types. We're going to try to do 2 or 3 each. I've done a lot of testing on this before, so we should see the results. So the Gatling gun, as you can see, can penetrate through the light armor extremely easily. Now when it comes to heavy armor, this is very important because look, we're barely getting any penetration and it can absorb a hell of a lot of armor. So basically it takes me ages to actually punch through that. I have to go over it 3 or 4 times with a few hundred rounds, where the light armor quickly destroys it. Now against rockets, we have a similar sort of result. The rocket punches a clean hole through the light armor, and against the heavy armor, we've got a very resistant piece of armor, so it takes 2 shots to actually crack and get the first hole into that heavy armor. But how can we make the ship armor more stronger, better, and just more efficient? So we've got some light armor blocks up here. I'm just going to go through these and test. So this is 4 layers, and this will stop a rocket dead after them layers. So we'll fire the rocket. There we go, you can see it's punched a clean hole through, but this is not effective. This is just wasting loads of armor to try to stop these rockets, and even the machine gun can punch its way through light armor, so it's not effective at all. Now if we slope the armor, we get a little bit of a better result, and you'll notice that the rocket actually bounces off the armor and deflects upwards. But what actually happens in some cases is it deflects upwards and gets trapped within the target, causing more damage to the actual target itself. So as you can see, first rocket goes up, the second rocket is going to get trapped inside and cause even more damage. And the results just keep repeating themselves again and again as long as you get it in the same spot. Now moving on to composite armor, the idea of stacking different layers like a sandwich. So we've got heavy armor on the outside, we've got light armor in the middle, and we've got another layer of heavy armor. Very interesting indeed. Now one thing to take into consideration about heavy armor is that this little square block is going to cost us, I believe, 220 steel plates, where a thin layer of light armor like that will cost us only 42, the exact number of blocks it creates. So let's actually try this sort of composite armor. You can see against the rockets it's quite effective, and against the machine gun fire it's going to remain effective. Even when I punch that hole through the first layer, it's going to get stuck on the second layer and try to have to push its way through that second layer of heavy armor, but it's not always that effective on the heavy ship. And if I fire a few more rockets to this, you can see how well that light armor in the middle is used to push it. So that's 2 rockets already fired. Now we're going to go into 3 and 4, and that second layer of armor is actually pushing out that first, so it makes the first layer a lot stronger and lasts just a little bit longer, as you can see here as we fire a few more rockets at it. Now going into the sloped armor variants of this is where it gets even more interesting. This deflection works very well. You'll notice as the missile actually deflects up and deflects most of the blast away from the armor, so this can take even more shots. So let's actually see when our first penetration will be. So that's 2, we've got 3 rounds, 4 rounds on the first spot, so 4 rounds it's took to penetrate that composition. Now if we fire into the hole, we'll see what sort of result we get, and it looks like it's actually deflected the round up and out the actual top. You can see how the blast wave has come up there, so it wouldn't actually penetrate in and damage the ship in the inside. You can still see how the thinner layer, now combined in the light armor and heavy armor, has mixed results. If you combine the light armor on the top, it'll warp the heavier armor and cause just results that you don't want. So you can see as we get in the deflection there, a few more bounces. Now we're moving on to spaced armor. Now there's a lot of discussion about this, people talking about, oh, I simply leave a gap between my armor and it's absorbed the actual fragments and the explosive round on the first, so it doesn't cause any damage to the internal side of my ship. And it is a very effective way of doing it. Now this block in total is 242s, so we've got 242 light armor blocks, So in total we have around 84 armor blocks, so that's a lot cheaper than doing the same sort of system out of heavy armor. Obviously the resistance to small arms fire is not going to be very good. You can see how we can penetrate straight through the first layer, and then we struggle to get through the second, but we still can do it quite easily. Now it comes into its own when rockets are fired at it. So you can see the first layer of armor is penetrated with a small hole, and the second layer is damaged but not destroyed, and that saves all them plates that we had to go through up there. So 4 layers is now turned into 2. Very interesting, very handy. We'll just do a final little test on this one here. We'll fire a rocket and we can fire some machine guns. You can see how it stands up to the test a little, but it's quite weak. Now we've got sloped armor on this surface here. We've got the space slope armor. Now this works very effectively. You can see how much bounce there actually is in the rocket. Very cool indeed. So we'll line up for this next one. We'll fire it. You can see how that one's actually penetrated and bounced up and gone through the top of the armor, and that's what we want. We want to deflect it as much as we can away from the targeted area. So there we go. You can also see the hole is a little bit smaller than the ones we targeted here before, and it's not actually getting as much penetration into the second layer, as you can see here, as the bigger targets that we had here. So there's a lot more penetration. So I left the tire in that one because this was one of my early experimentation ones, and I'll show you exactly why I did that on these down here. Now, I found out that the tire does some interesting things to these pieces of armor. It pushes the blocks out in such a way where they can absorb a lot more rocket hits. Now, putting tires inside your armor on a light ship is not always the easiest thing to do, but where you can, it's going to increase the effectiveness extremely. So you can see, as we're doing this, it's actually pushing the light armor out. We've got a small crack appearing there, but since this tire's behind it, it's pushed out and kept most of the armor really flat. So we'll try some rockets against it. So as you can see, we're going to try 3 or 4 rockets just around the same area, not exactly on the same point. And you can see how the tires actually pushed that piece of armor out. So now, if we were trying this on a normal target, it would have already broke through. But you can see how the tires remaining firm inside there, and it's floating away. It's broken off the mount, but the actual area has not been penetrated at all. So it's still not been penetrated. The missiles angling off at all different angles and stuff, and I just can't get inside there. And that's because that tire is pushing out the armor as it tries to deform. Now let's try that on the slopes, and we're going to get an even more interesting result. So since I've already got a little bit of a crack from the small arms fire, you can see how we're breaking in, and once that tire is actually destroyed, it will stop pushing the armor out. But I think the main reason this works quite well is because the armor, the little tire here has a little space between that and the armor, so every time it bumps into it, it pads it out, allowing it to take more rocket fire. Now, I want you to take away from this exactly what you've seen. You don't have to work out your own sort of thoughts. In my opinion, the spaced armor is probably one of the most cheapest ways of doing your armor, putting a little bit of a gap in the area between. I found about 2 seems to be the best area, but building that into a smaller ship is going to leave you with a much bulkier design. So you might want to spend the money, get some extra spare sheets of heavy armor, and absorb that armor up in the areas. Now, you can also use this quite sparingly and put it in only the important areas, so around the back of your ship, around the cockpit, and you should have a very safe fighter, or just a merchant ship indeed. Now, most of these results work on the heavy ships as well, thinking that the caliber of these rockets struggles even more to penetrate the larger blocks. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and hopefully you've learned a little bit about the armor in Space Engineers today. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.